Okay, I'm just going to get straight to the point. Things are getting a little bit serious. I'm going to jump into some wartime economics and what this means for cryptocurrency. And I'm going to try to educate people on the history of finance to a certain extent. And don't be surprised if my future videos get this very deep. We're going to get very deep into the history of finance so we can kind of see how this could play out, by looking at other wars. Just to be clear with you guys, I am forever a cryptocurrency maximalist because I do believe that the variables that are currently happening in today's day and age are a perfect catalyst for crypto. Now, time horizons, that's a different question. There's no way to time the market. But again, all of my research is leading to one path. And you should be very excited about being involved with the cryptocurrency market. All right. So if we come over here, there's just a lot of short term noise, right? We can clearly see, you can go look at the war, on Twitter and watch the videos and everything. But it's pretty much the same thing over and over again. And what I've realized is that it's almost a distraction for the most people. Now, again, I don't want to sit here and say what's going on is not tragic. I'm just saying, and the purposes of what we're doing here, it's really a big financial war that started this literal war. So for me as a person, and maybe this is not relevant to you, I'm going to focus because I've been fighting the financial war for the past 6 years. I've been consistently educating people and fighting this financial war for a long time. So anytime I don't fight the financial war, well, that's a net loss to me, right? It's a net loss. But we can see hints and cracks in the economy. Okay. As you can see here, Russian stocks are plummeting to like all-time lows, dropping 33%, in some cases 50%. And they are putting, this ban on people being able to use their bank accounts or sell any of their assets. And again, we see this over and over again. It's pretty consistent throughout history or human history where they actually halt the sales or, there's bank runs or things where they put these limiting factors on people's finance for whatever reason. And in some cases, they do it to finance the war, right? So we have these centralized entities just kind of taking control and basically stealing people's money, in some cases through tax, or in some cases through literally stealing people's money to finance a war that a lot of them don't even believe in. And this is, again, a consistent theme throughout time. So let's just talk about the real war, kind of elaborating on what I was saying in the beginning of the video. Look, in 2008, through the housing market crash, basically the gist here is that America had this kind of power that nobody had. And again, it's a common thing throughout mankind that there's one country that has the world reserve currency. And it just so happened to be in the last 94 years, America has been that country that has owned the most powerful currency on earth, right? So when all the world saw the housing market crash in America and basically how they bailed everybody out, just to give you guys a brief history, the housing market crash was basically banks taking advantage of people and getting greedy. And then eventually when the Ponzi scheme came to a halt and there was a massive crash, they basically bailed all themselves out and there was no one to be held responsible, essentially. So what America said to the world at that one time is they basically said, hey, world, we have this dominance over the United States dollar, and we could basically do whatever we want with the currency. That's what they told the world, basically. So if we look over here at Russia gold reserves, you can clearly see that exactly around 2007, 2008, they started accumulating a lot of gold. And the reason for that is because gold is hard money, right? It's hard money. And I want to try to explain this through some diagrams we have here. But basically, every single country goes through similar cycles that you see here, right? So they basically start off as hard money. And we know that America at one point was considered hard money. They had a standard of gold that backed the US dollar. So America had little or no debt. The golden age, right, where things were flourishing, money backed by something real. Basically, this maximizes credibility and minimizes the actual credit. But eventually, people start making claims on the hard money. And this is where you actually see like physical dollars, right? And there's benefits of making claims on hard money. One benefit is that you have actual dollars that you can buy coffee with, right? You can't really buy, coffee with a gold bar, right? So there's the divisibility element of making claims or having notes on money. And basically what I'm trying to explain is, hey, there's a bank that has a whole bunch of gold. I'm going to take this certificate that has a claim on 1% of the gold, and the certificate can be used to buy things, and then the other person that receives a certificate when I actually buy something can go get that claim on the gold, right? So this is like what money means, right? And then this expands the credit, very limited. It depends on how far they take it, but it compromises credibility because now you have the centralized entity that controls essentially this gold reserve, right? And then it typically moves into stage three. And again, this is not just America. This is basically to all countries that have a world reserve currency, or pretty much every country on earth, where it kind of turns more into something called fiat money, or money that is backed up by the credibility of the government, right? Because they start taking out a lot of claims and the debt gets very high. So in this stage, this is where we currently are, where it maximizes the credit, but the credibility is at an all-time low. And there's a lot of increased debt. Okay. There's a lot of increased debt. This is again currently where we are, with the United States. We have a ridiculous amount of debt that we can't pay off, right? People are losing faith in the government. You can clearly see that inflation is like literally a headline news piece now. 7.5% inflation. Everybody basically knows this. Everybody kind of knows that inflation is ruining their money and their savings, right? So we're transitioning, and there's been, again, periods of transition where we do get back to hard money. But typically this transition back starts, economic pressures, right? A lot of issues happen when they try to move back into hard money or a form of hard money. So, like for example, there's been times where they minimize the amount of money printing, and we've gone into recessions. Because it's just almost like you get sick and you have to like lay down for a couple of days to get better. Essentially the same thing, right? So you have to heal the wound, and the wound is fiat money, right? And when they do that, there's always contractions, right? So this is again a common thing that's happened throughout mankind, and it's nothing new to America. So it's not like America is like fundamentally evil. This happens throughout history. And you could also see in 2008 we have a big increase of gold reserves from China. So you can clearly see that China and Russia was trying to make their economy essentially American proof. They're trying to make their economy American proof, right? And it's because they have this control, right? So you can control people by multiple things. You could physically control and enslave somebody with physical threats and hit them with whips on their back, right? And this is what you call slavery. But you could also control somebody's finance. If they can't pay their bills and they can't get food, well, essentially you can offer them money to get these things, right? So they can live their life. And America has essentially put sanctioned or controlled the world with economic conditions by diluting their dollar, having this basically monopoly on how much money gets printed and where the money goes, essentially. And this is why the dollar has been devalued over a long period of time with its purchasing power, right? So you could see, again, when they tried to increase the value of the dollar by getting into this phase here of trying to make it hard money, we go into recessions. You can clearly see the pink is the recession band. It's not always that way, but it is a lot of times, right? When they try to increase the value of the dollar, again, we have these big recessions. So you have to pay attention to these periods of time, especially right now with the war going on, to see how it affects typically you. But there's something else I wanted to show you guys. Wars are not always military wars. Typically, they play out in a lot of other ways before their actual military wars. So we have trade and economic wars. This is sanctions and things like that they're talking about on the internet. We have technology wars and hacks and things like that. We have geopolitical wars. This is currently what's happening right now. And problems with territory. We have capital wars, right, where they can shut down banks. We're currently seeing this as well. And then we have the physical military war. But let me just be clear with you guys. The real war is not physical. The real war is definitely most of the time. And this what runs the world majority of the time. Wars don't last as long as, other times in history, right? So, again, like these are what really happened. And this puts constraints. And ultimately, when America or any other country puts a constraint on another one, when it comes to trade and economic, the country is basically at a standstill and have to do something like physical, right? They have to force some type of military action, right? But it's usually comes from like a trade and economic issue or something like that, right? So how does this really affect you? Well, throughout history, in wartime economic controls, typically the government takes over, right? And if you have money in the bank, if you have a retirement, just be careful. I'm actually talking to my dad about having to move his retirement out of the banks because there could be a lot of issues, like, for example, rationing, production controls, price wage controls, import export restrictions. And this is mostly for businesses, or a takeover of a central bank. As you can see, it's almost 100%. They use all of their controls in the government to take over basically people's money. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. Regulation impact on assets. So if you currently have assets, there's market closures. America didn't have a market closure in World War II, but it's because they were on the winning side, right? But imagine if they're on the losing side. This is what it looks like. Pretty much market closes, all of them close, right? Asset price controls, there's controlling variables. You cannot withdraw your stocks, for example, things like that. Asset ownership restrictions, FX controls, big tax. As you can see, are 94% of the United States, limits on new issuance, and limit on corporate profits. So essentially, when they go into war, the government uses its power to essentially siphon a lot of the profits and a lot of people's wealth into the war issues, right? And again, we see it almost 100% through the board that all of these wartime issues will lead to some type of controlling of your money, guys. So be very careful. There's a reason why I have virtually no money in traditional bank or traditional stock market, because I don't actually control the asset. Most of my money is in things I actually can control, like crypto. And this is the beauty of crypto and why it's so important. Also, another thing to point out, since we're going over wartime economics, I did want to point out that most of the time, returns in a wartime are basically isolated to battles, right? So if you watch the battles and how they're won or lost, this is essentially what got the best returns, equity return index, around the time of World War II. And what we're looking at here again is World War II. Right. And I do wanted to bring it back over here to the World War II timeline to kind of make this point of what I'm saying over here, reality. But basically, we had, the great crash of 1929, which basically put in a tariff act to tighten, the economic policy and not print so much money, basically try to transition to hard money. And then, what happened is that there was bad conditions. Remember, I told you, when you try to remedy the problem, you have to go through like kind of this remedy period. And there was a whole bunch of bad conditions in the economy. And then what happened which was really interesting, is through these bad conditions, there was actually a huge U.S. Drought, which is like a harmful act of nature that we can't control, which led to deflation. And then they actually tightened the monetary policy again. Which led to a lot of issues, right? Around this time, Germany was actually attacking and took over Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, France, and they were just taking over everything for the natural oil resource. And Japan at the same time was trying to occupy China in 1937. And what we're doing again is we're going over kind of a World War II timeline, so I could show you that most of these are playing out right now, which ultimately led to the military wars. And in some cases, some part of the world, there was already military wars, right? But the conflicts between Japan and America became, escalated, right? And became a reality, or began to escalate, right? And then what happened is ultimately what started the war was sanctions, right? Export Control Act of 1940 basically put massive stress on Japan. And then they pushed it forward with the Lend-Lease Act in 1941. And essentially, Roosevelt froze all Japanese assets in the United States and cut off 3/4 of its trade and 80% of all of its oil. And this big sanction right here led to a real war, which was, obviously the attack of Pearl Harbor. And the reason for that is because they took away 80% of all oil, and Japan basically did the math, and they realized that they only had about 2 years left of oil, to survive basically for their country. So they were kind of forced in a situation where it was like life or death for them, and they had to attack Pearl Harbor. So a lot of times, countries are smart. They're not just going to attack for no reason. Usually they're going to have like a serious reason to attack. So, we clearly see, threats of sanctions right now happening with Biden against Putin and stuff like that. So this could lead to something really real, guys, something where they're forced in a corner. And they have to survive. So yeah, just pay attention to what's going on, because it is really important. Now, let's talk about really briefly, assets that do well in these times. And you can clearly see it right now. Wheat is on the rise. And the reason for that is because it's real, it's physical, right? Now, I'm not trying to tell you guys to go buy a wheat stock. I'm just saying, We see a lot of big corporations buying wheat farms right now for a reason, right? So, like, obviously, food constraints, right? And this is why I have about 2 years worth of dry food at my house, just in case things went down. I have food, I have water, I have electric solar panels, right? Electric generator, right? Things like this will help you in hard times, right? And then we can clearly see oil is on the rise, right? We see oil skyrocketing in price because of obvious reasons. Same thing kind of in World War II, where Germany was just attacking countries to get their natural resources and mostly oil. You could see that there's a big constraint on oil right now. So pay attention to that. Other things, as you can clearly see here, is lumber, right? So natural resources become scarce in times like war. And you can consider Bitcoin it's not a natural resource, but you can consider it a commodity, which is very similar to natural resources, which will play into our case of maybe potentially cryptocurrency solves a lot of problems, right? And you can see soybeans and futures, rising in price as well. Going exponential in some cases because, again, the constraints on the economy, right? And then we see corn as well doing very well. So things like this usually happen, again, around times of economic uncertainty. So basically, what does this mean for crypto? Very simply put, guys, there's huge sanctions being threatened in Russia, right? A lot of countries are threatening Russia, not by physical military act, but they're threatening them financially, similar to what we saw in World War II, right? Similar to what we saw over here, where Roosevelt froze all Japan assets in U.S. and cut off 3/4 of Japan's trade, right? And 80% of all their oil was gone, right? So we're literally seeing that potentially happen right now with Russia. And I think it's really crazy. We always thought that we always thought that cryptocurrency was going to be adopted because of hyperinflation. But in this case, we're probably seeing a situation where crypto gets adopted by Russia because of these sanctions. As you clearly see, it's literally all I typed in. I didn't type in, I typed in crypto news, and you can see that's pretty much all anyone could talk about is, basically that they can evade American sanctions by adopting crypto. And I think it's really interesting that if we look at the crypto search term specifically in Russia, it is booming right now. And it even started booming before they started talking about this specifically. It started booming as soon as the war happened. So can war catalyze cryptocurrency? I don't know, guys. Leave a comment, in the video below and let me know what you guys think. But wartime economics, wartime finance. I'm going to be diving into these topics. So feel free to subscribe to the channel. My goal here is to provide the highest quality information on the internet while everybody's running with their head cut off and panicking. I want to be clear. I want to be concise. I want to give you guys real direction and lead you to financial independence, even through these times of uncertainty. So subscribe to the channel. If you like the quality of this content, hit like. If you don't, leave some constructive criticism, subscribe for more video updates. And like I always say, if you don't get with it, you will get left behind. Also, guys, follow me on Twitter. I'm definitely putting out some high quality information before it reaches YouTube. And we're trying to grow so we can, have some credibility over here in the crypto Twitter space. So yeah, go follow me on Twitter, Alex on Crypto. We do spaces all the time. I'm always doing some type of space, and I'll leave the actual link and a pinned comment below. So pay attention, guys. The world is changing, and you need to adapt with it. That's it for this video. Catch you in the next one.